Mike G, thank you so much for your time and coming on to the Basketball Performance Podcast.
I love that basketball performance podcast. I might be doing something right here, huh?
Yeah, definitely, man. I have a ton of questions, but before we get into it, can you give us a brief background about yourself, where you're from? How did you get into hoops? Did you play hoops? And then how did you transition into coaching?
What's up, everybody? This is Coach Mike Guevara. I've been in the performance industry for 12 years now, mainly in the basketball space for the last 7-8 years. I'm originally from the Bay Area in California. I actually did not play basketball my entire life. I mean, I fooled around with it on the playground and whatnot, but my main sports were martial arts as well as American football. So I was able to earn a scholarship to play football in a small D2 school in Michigan. And truthfully, the way I got into the basketball space was just being in the right place at the right time. I worked at a performance facility that trained a lot of pro athletes, including NBA athletes. And I just happened to connect with one that was particularly pretty good by the name of Dru Holiday. And he and I created a special bond and friendship, and we grew together professionally as well as socially. And one day, about year 7 of his career, he asked me to travel full time. And that's what busted the doors down for me as an NBA performance coach. I was able to join the Pelican staff for 2 years, which introduced me to Anthony Davis, whom also hired me as a trainer. And then, through the powers of social media, I was able to get a lot of clients because I showcased a lot of my work through Instagram. And, that's pretty much my life right now. My wife and I run 2 businesses. We have our training business, which is what, I do on a day-to-day. And then we also have an app business that we just launched in February called GBG Hoops. She and I worked together on that throughout the pandemic, and it finally released a few months ago. And basically it's your off-court training resource to become a better basketball player.
Awesome. Awesome. So when people think about performance training, most people think about the sets and reps and all the cool stuff that you do on camera or on social media. But I'm a strong believer that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. What are some of the ways that you go about creating buy-in from your athletes to create trust so that you can work in a much smoother way with them?
Yeah, this question is pretty much the underlying principle of why I think I'm in the position I'm in. And it's funny that you open with this question with the Basketball Performance Podcast, because I'm actually presenting this Sunday on exactly this.
Okay.
At a facility out here in Los Angeles. And a lot of people ask me on a day-to-day basis, how do you get to work with professional athletes? And truthfully, a lot of it has to do with just being in the right place at the right time. But when you are gifted an opportunity, these professional athletes are always trying to be impressed by someone because everyone wants something from them. So their BS meter or their BS radar is very, very keen and specific.
Yep.
So the best thing I could say to people is don't do that. Don't try to impress anybody. These are human beings. These are, for the most part, younger people, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, that are very impressionable, but also are very aware. So I think being yourself and owning who you are for the most part is the number one way to earn someone's trust. Don't do too much. Don't try to impress someone by how much you know. Don't throw up all over them with scientific jargon. Don't, it's a very overwhelming thing when you do that to these people. So identifying and meeting people where they're at, I think, is the number one thing that you can really try to hone and go specifically into. And what I mean by that is if I'm working with a 21-year-old kid that had just got drafted into the NBA, what type of music does that kid listen to? What are his interests or her interests? What are their favorite places to eat? Where are they from? And for the simple fact that I was a military brat growing up, meaning I moved around a lot. I lived in the South, Alabama, Louisiana, Georgia. I lived overseas in Germany. I'm a West Coast boy. So obviously I lived in the Bay Area in Los Angeles, spent some time in Michigan. I have the ability to communicate to all different types of people based off of my own personal experience. So being able to identify with young people, the music they listen to, the fashion, the way we speak is a very easy way to earn someone's trust. And I think once you earn their trust, then you can start to implement a standard and accountability, because you can't implement these types of things in the private sector or in the team sector if they don't believe you, trust you, like you. So in a sense, it's a very, very delicate social situation before you can get into the nuts and bolts in which you just spoke of. And that's what I feel I hold my hat high on, is my ability to make people feel comfortable, make people like me, make people believe me, trust me. And from that point on, now I can lay down the standard in which I work and what I expect them to work at.
So say, for example, this is a follow-up question to that. You may be working with a player, it doesn't even really matter what sport, that is coming to you, maybe because just hypothetically, because his agent wants him to come to you, or he's coming because he has to come. And he may not believe in, say, strength training, like just basic strength training. He just wants to work out with bands, and he has a basketball in his hand and he wants to work out like just this. This is what he believes is going to get him better on the court. Okay. So you have someone who's maybe a little bit more apprehensive when it comes to believing in strength and conditioning. How are you going to approach working with that person, even though you know what he wants is not the best way for him in the long run?
This is a not so unique situation.
Right.
This happens a lot, right?
Yes.
And you have to create that buy-in. So I think a lot of it has to do with a conversation. In this field, it's very egotistical. And I think a lot of mistakes that trainers make are their program is the end all be all, their program. So for instance, my name is Coach Mike G, and this is my program. You are coming into my arena. This is my weight room. This is how I do things. That's not going to do well at all, ever, especially with pro athletes, unless, no, not even unless, even if you're a head strength coach or performance coach for a team, a pro team, if you have that type of standard, then you're going to lose a lot of players. And guys will show up, but that doesn't mean that they're there. Just because I'm here doesn't mean I'm present, if you know what I mean. So back to the example, everything stems from a conversation. So I'm going to sit said player down, athlete A, and say, okay, I understand that you don't like to lift weights. Why? Why is that? Athlete A is going to answer. Let's just say that he says the typical thing, which is, well, it's going to mess my jump shot up.
Yep.
Very, very classic answer. It's going to mess my jump shot up. I'm going to lose my touch. Then I'm going to say, how did you derive that conclusion? Did you experience that? What was it that makes you feel that way? So we're going to keep breaking down the layer of the onion to finally find the root of why he feels the way he does. Excuse me. So once we find that root, then we can start to say, okay, I'm going to meet you halfway. I understand you feel the way you do. I, as a coach, am very adaptable. I'm going to understand your sentiment. I'm going to explain to you why I think you should do things, and then we'll go from there. And 90% of the time, they're going to be cool with that because they feel collaboration. And once people feel like they're being collaborated with versus being told what to do, they're going to be a little bit more open. And once you create that openness, slide right in. And now you can you can capture their imagination with creative ways to strength train, but still get done what you want to get done, as well as get done what they want to get done, which was not lift weights. And then all of a sudden, they're going to become more and more open to doing things that you feel is best. And I think that's where the art of coaching comes in, is you have to be able to communicate purpose. You have to communicate reasoning, and then also be a little bit kind of like, I don't want to say fool, but sometimes you do things to make it look like this, but you're really trying to do that. So you're kind of tricking them into doing something you know is best for them, but they don't know that.
We call that hiding the vegetables in the spaghetti sauce.
Yes, very well done. Very well said. Hide those vegetables. Eat that spaghetti. It tastes delicious, but you didn't know that there was a grip of kale in the sauce, did you? So again, though, those types of things come with experience, though. No new strength coach is ever going to be able to do that in year 1 through 5. It's a feel thing. It's an experience thing. It's continuously being in front of different types of people. And then once all of a sudden you're put in front of that person, you don't even think about it. You just know how to wiggle and finagle the situation. And I feel like that's how we can get through to that athlete.
So what I'm hearing, Mike, just off of that, is empathy is very important. And the fact that they're being heard is extremely important. I guess a lot of coaches, again, it's my way or the highway kind of mentality. I would classify that as maybe a little bit more traditional, where just human beings in general want to know that you care and that you care about their opinion, and that again, their opinion might be valid in some ways. Is like you asked the question is, I mean, have you experienced this? Did you experience this? No, I mean, but my man back home said that if I bench press more than 135, that's going to mess my jump shot up, right?
I have a story for you. Ready? You're getting a gem right now. I've never told this story before, by the way. I was in the weight room in the Lakers. No. Whoever Jerry West works for, either the Lakers. Okay.
Yep.
I was in the Lakers weight room doing pre-game workouts with some of the players, and Jerry West walks in and is looking at everybody, and I didn't even know who he was because I'm not really paying attention. And he goes, all this right here, this is what's wrong with the game right now. Why is everybody working out before the game? And somebody told me what he said, and I was like, he, from a traditional mind standpoint, still thinks that lifting weights messes up people's jump shots. So you got he's the logo, right? He's the logo.
Yeah.
You got the logo saying lifting weights messes up your jump shot. So, you know, naturally that's the logo. So if he's saying it, then there's a lot of people out there that believes that as well. So, you know, it's not wrong for people to feel that way, because you got this legend talking about that still.
Wow.
And, you know, that's the battle that we have to fight. Empathy is the number one word that you can probably put into this subject matter. Understanding people's sentiment, thoughts, feelings, and letting them be heard, and then like really taking that into consideration matters.
That's awesome. And thank you for that insight. That's an amazing story. I'm going to remember the logo said that to you. So
the logo said that.
So, okay, let's get into the cool stuff that everybody wants to hear about in terms of how Mike G goes about assessing players. So can you give us an idea in general, what kind of physical qualities do you feel like in general, like very, very general, that basketball players might be lacking a little bit in?
Physical qualities?
Physical qualities.
We're talking about outputs.
I would say like just physical in general. Do you think it's like a little bit more, they need max strength? Do you think it's ankle mobility? Do you think it's
okay.
What in general, what do you think is gonna? Yeah.
So we'll go through the ability to move, and a very close saying to me is never be a prisoner of your own body.
Okay.
And there's a lot of basketball players are trapped inside their own body. They're not able to express their movement quality the way they should be able to, because joints simply don't move.
Okay.
Hence, they're prisoners of their own body.
Yeah.
So that being said, look at the development of a basketball player in America. Generally speaking, they probably start around 10 years old. And what do they get thrown into right away? You know, they AAU. And AAU is between 5 to 10 games Friday through Saturday with terrible footwear on, because Nike, Adidas, and let's just say Nike and Adidas care more about aesthetics than they do function, which sells shoes. I'm not tripping. I get it. But that's not doing our players justice, our young players justice. And because they're playing so many games back to back to back, they're not getting out of their sneakers. So over the course of a decade, from 10 years old till 20, their shoes are creating skis inside of the body. So their feet become extremely rigid. The big toes don't extend. The ankles don't dorsiflex nor plantar flex. And you're losing so much range of motion and force displacement just because your feet are blocks. They don't really have any type of sensory motor, tactile feel, anything. You take a basketball player and try to tell them to walk barefoot through just the street. They're like, ow, my feet. They're so sensitive because they're just simply not used to being outside of their shoes. So as a trainer, we know that force travels up the chain. So if my feet are dysfunctional, my big toes don't move, my ankles don't move, what's the next joint up? The knee. So if we're trying to create needed motion that's not being available in the lower leg, in the knee, is the knee supposed to be mobile? No, it's not. It's supposed to be a stable joint, right? So now we're trying to create mobility in a knee joint that's required for stability, which already has red flags all over it. That being said, is our athletes taking a keen look at how playing basketball year round, that much volume, does to our body? I think it has a really bad effect on the overall development of the athlete. So now you got guys, because training is playing essentially when you're younger. You don't have a lot of players training per se, or doing movement training, or doing other sports. They always talk about in the draft, how many sports did this player or this kid play throughout high school, I'm saying in middle school. And usually the kid that plays the most amount of sports is probably the most fluid, athletic player on the court. So that being said, looking at the hip joint, basketball is played predominantly in external rotation, knees out, feet out. We're even teaching that as young developmental coaches, how to slide knees out, feet wide. So now we're stuck in this external rotation position. My ankles barely move. My big toes are super stiff. Those two ideas, in terms of being a prisoner of your body, are probably 80 to 90% of what I've seen in all of basketball players: tight hips, tight ankles. That being said, what's the number one injury in basketball?
Probably ankle sprain.
Ankle sprain. 70% of injuries happen at the lower leg, AKA ankle sprain.
Yeah.
So now you have these terrible feet, these terrible ankles, and probably several sprains on both sides. What are we talking about? We were talking about locked up ankles that barely move, which means the human body is going to compensate in order to gain motion where it lacks. So there's two things in a long-winded way of saying, typically ankles, big toes, and hips are super tight on most athletes.
I'm just curious for you, how long do you usually get your players for? Because you're in a space where are you currently working with a team, or are you just
I'm completely independent, and
yeah.
Typically I'll get them for, let's say, 8 to 12 weeks.
Okay.
Every summer.
Okay. And when they leave, do you stay in touch with them? Obviously, I'm sure you do, but like homework that they can do.
Yeah. We have a thing called EDDs, everyday drills, that I specifically prescribed to each athlete per their individual needs. And
Mm.
I'll film them so that they have a video reference, give them sets and reps. And that's their daily movement vitamin, their movement practice from Coach Mike G that they need to take with them throughout the season so that movement hygiene can be solid throughout the year. Because, you know, as the season gets started, especially if you're a high minute guy, the last thing you want to do is just move more. But this is what it takes. This is the life you chose.
And when you get your athletes, because you're totally independent, what kind of, if at all, performance metrics do you look at? I mean, does it necessarily have to be a vertical jump, a 1 RM squat, a single leg broad jump? What kind of things are you looking at? And this could differ from player to player, depending on how long they've been playing and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to get an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, truthfully, a lot of it's subjective, you know, feel. A lot of it is what I see. It would be a disservice to not create an objective profile on the players that I'm working with right now. But truthfully, I don't have really the technology to do so. I mean, if I had force plates and could measure, by unilateral mid-thigh isometric pull, so we can compare left to right. If we can do a NORD board, if we can see these asymmetry imbalances, that's going to definitely help create a directive into what we need to do as far as programming goes. But I'm not really taking any metrics right now. I think a lot of it is feel. And, I'm okay with that because a lot of the guys that I'm working with now, I've been working with for years. So, we kind of know what we're looking at. We kind of know where we want to go. And then also I have the team's resources as well. Every team in the NBA is doing objective data. So if it's something that I need, I can just easily hit their teams up and have that data sent over.
Now, you talked about getting players out of their shoes and those thick socks that players wear all day long. And so I'm guessing barefoot training is a huge part of your program. What's another thing on top of barefoot training that you would suggest is, what do you call it? Everyday drills, EDD. Oh, sorry. Is it EDD?
EDDs.
What's another EDD that you would prescribe to the average high school athlete besides barefoot training that they could be implementing daily where within a year they'd see huge progress?
Well, I think that looking at the buckets of common dysfunction for high school player A is big toe and ankle dorsiflexion. So I'm a big fan of functional range conditioning, FRC. I use a lot of their principles in my practice. And just taking a wall and wedging your big toe up against the wall and getting that stretch and then creating a contraction by pushing your big toe into the wall. So what are you doing? You're contracting at length. Is an extremely effective way to get those big toes a little bit more mobile, a little more juicy. And then also, if they ever experience high velocity force, the brain is able to understand those forces and maybe your big toe is safe, right? It's when we get put into positions that we've never experienced before with force and velocities when bad things happen. So I think we need to understand that. Look at the demands in which basketball players are experiencing and what they could put them in those positions and allow them to experience high forces there so that they can be ready for those forces in the game. Basketball is very random and chaotic, so you can't prepare for everything, but the more movement variability that you can apply to the organism, the better at they are going to be to negotiate those forces. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And going off that, I mean, you're like just following on social media. You do so many similar things that I do. What is some of the things that you're looking at right now that's exciting you in our field of performance?
It's got to be, shout out to Alex Natera and Pacey Performance. What is that? They rebranded though.
He has a podcast, Pacey Performance Podcast. I'll plug them. I think that's his podcast. Yeah.
Yes. Well, Alex Natera collaborated with Pacey Performance, Sportsmith. And for those who don't know, he has systematized and created a very thoughtful way to program the different array of isometrics that he uses with his athletes. Now, he works with rugby players, and sprinting, top end sprinting is a quality that is very much needed in their sport. So he utilizes position specific isometrics, different styles of isometrics, to improve the quality of top end speed. And it's proven to be phenomenal in terms of results. So me being who I am, knowing, understanding that isometrics is such a valuable key and tool for in-season athletes, I've taken a significantly attentive degree of focus towards this program. I bought it, and I'm still sifting through it. This is one of those things that you'll probably want to listen to or read once a year just to refresh,
right?
Perhaps create new inspiration. But he talks about, no, it doesn't have to be run specific positions. It could be, look at your sport. What are the positions that your athletes need to be able to either A, produce high amounts of force, or B, withstand high amounts of force, and figure out a way to train that.
Absolutely. With the isometrics.
Yep.
When you're working with a player that's coming back from injury, how do you go about approaching helping them coming back physically? But for me, I'm more interested in how you help them maybe kind of try your best to get over mental barriers, because that's obviously a big thing. If they're coming back from a big injury, there's a lot going on here, right? So they're more nervous about doing things that they used to do easily. What kind of conversations are you having? What kind of environments are you putting them in? What does that kind of look like? What does your process look like?
I think it's very important for us as coaches to have records, obviously, to show your injured athletes or your rehabbed athletes, your rehabbing athletes, the progress. Because when you see progress, when athletes see progress, that creates a sense of motivation in itself, from the standpoint, I'm doing the right things to be where I need to be. Number two, video. I think videoing, maybe you have a baseline test that you do every week. Maybe it's a skater squat. Maybe it's a pistol squat. Maybe it's a step up, maybe whatever it is. And you video day one, and you see the struggle, you see the shaking, you see the frustration, you see the instability, but then you show them day 30 of that same baseline test, and you're like, this is 30 days ago. That's not even a full month in some months. Look how much improvement you've made. Again, creating that flood of serotonin, like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm doing the right things. Like we're going in the right direction. Number three, appraisals, self-appraisals. As a coach, call it out. Like, bro, look what you just did. You're sticking this landing with ease. Remember like 2 weeks ago, how unstable that landing was? Bring those moments up and into the light so that they can remember and fully become immersed with that experience of, I'm actually improving, right? Like, this is important. You have to consistently remind players that they're improving, because sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm improving when it's so incremental.
Right.
But then when you look at it from a growth standpoint, day 30 to day one, it's like, look, bro, look at this phone. Look at this video. Look how much stable you are. Look how much stronger you are, And then I think the objective data piece comes into play there too, as well, as where like when we were doing Spencer's rehab, we did single leg mid-thigh symmetric pull on surgical side versus non-surgical side. And the asymmetry was like, 30-40%. All of a sudden, 2 months later, the surgical side started to get like a little bit stronger than the non-surgical side. So that's a moment. That's a moment, right? That's like, oh my gosh, like, okay, we getting somewhere here. And then I think also, this is obviously less talked about because there's really no way to teach this, but
yes,
creating environments that are a little more random and chaotic, just to allow them to explore their new strength, new movement, new skill, I think is important. You just have to be very understanding of how to create that environment so that it's a safe environment.
Talk a little bit more about that, if you would. Give me like I this is where I want to go, but can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah. So for the natural example I'm going to use is Spencer, because he's the most recent rehab athlete I've had, in which it wasn't just me. There were 4 other professionals that were a part of the team that made up of that. So, but in terms of our training, I think that if we can create an unstable environment, not from the standpoint of balance or stability, but unstable in terms of reaction, chaos, chance, simply using special drills and filming them to review with the athlete is a good way to show how biomechanics are actually changing. Case in example, I have a drill that I love to do. It's a reaction drill. Let's say that you and I are facing each other and I have a med ball and your hands are over the med ball. And I say to you, okay, you're going to stand on one leg, your surgical leg, and you're going to catch the med ball before it hits the ground. So as soon as I drop the med ball, you're going to catch the med ball before it hits the ground. Someone is behind me filming so that they can see Spencer move.
Yep.
Okay. His strategy initially is going to be to do this really fast.
Yep.
Do this really fast. It's a hands drill. It's a quick hands drill. Coach him up. All right, Spence. Let's not think about being fast with our hands, but let's think about being quicker to the floor. Lower your mass, your center of mass fast so that you can get down to the floor as quick as you can. And then you're just waiting for the ball to fall into your hands. Okay, coach, for sure. Boom. We review the film. He does it right. And then now I can show him his knee alignment. Look at you had no idea that this was a knee drill. Look at your knee as you lowered into your hips to catch the ball. You had a great line between your hip, knee, and ankle. You didn't have any instability of valgus or varus or whatever. It was a clean pattern. You were super stable, no wavering or teetering. Your trunk didn't sway left or right. And I didn't have to tell you none of that. And those types of drills are the ones that I'm trying to create that transfer of function from a rehab perspective, because they're not even being coached to keep their knee in alignment. Do you see what I'm saying? How many times?
Task specific is task. The task is coaching.
Exactly. The task is the coach. And, you walk into a rehab clinic and, the PT is like, okay, your knee is tracking in, your knee is tracking in, like consistently getting this feedback, which is fine. That there's a time and place for that. But I also believe that there's a time and place for no coaching, creating a task and a goal, catch the ball before it hits the ground, and then seeing what happens.
For sure. No, that's great. Thank you for going there. Can you talk a little bit, because one of the things I'm so grateful to all the performance and strength coaches for coming on, is one of the things that you're able to see different perspectives. And while I learn from so many different people, there's so many philosophies out there. For you, where is the balance between, and if you even believe in this, general and specific strength? And let me talk about what I would define as specific strength. So specific strength is keeping in mind the joint motions, like you mentioned, the speed of which they're being used on the court, which is obviously fast. In particular motions of the court. What's your belief in terms of training specific or special strength as opposed to general strength?
Man, this is the meat and
another
potatoes.
Podcast.
No, I mean, it's a great subject matter though. This is the meat and potatoes, man. Like, yeah, we're organisms, we're biological systems. And to skip over general strength is like building a house without a strong foundation, in my opinion. And I think that at the end of the day, looking at the demands of a sport like basketball, it's physical, it's violent, it's chaotic, it's multi-directional, it's reactive. There's so many qualities that could be what am I trying to say? These types of qualities are are advanced, no, not necessarily advanced. Anyways, the nature of the game, if you're not building your body, if you're not creating the GPP phase where we build this strong foundation of the system, then I feel like I call it the body armor. Like when we're in GPP, we're building the body armor. We're doing high volume. We're doing lots of reps. We're building motor control. We're building fascia and hypertrophy and all the adaptations that happen in ligament and tendon and bone, specifically to build a really strong house on top of this foundation, so that when we get into the system, the season, we're able to sustain violent cuts, collisions, actions for an 82 game season.
Yeah.
Excuse me for not being able to speak.
No,
but
no.
You understand what I'm saying?
I do. I totally understand what you're trying to say.
The demands of the sport are violent. So we should prepare for that physically.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So the GPP phase for me, general preparatory phase, is exactly that. It's the preparation to sustain violence on the body for a long period of time. Now, obviously, we do need to maintain our adaptations throughout the season, and that's a whole nother podcast as well. But in order to build that beautiful house tall and strong, you need that foundation. So that's where the GPP and specifically speaking, general means general. So are we doing a goblet squat? Yes. Are we doing a shoulder press? Yes. We're doing traditional lifts because we're building the body armor. And I feel like that's what's going to determine whether or not we're robust as an athlete or not. Moving on into the special strength, specific strength, that's going to be more movement specific, joint range specific, output specific to the person's position, style of play, and sport. My opinion, just before we get into the season, there should be less time on the weight room and more time on the court, period. How do I create specific adaptations there without just playing? I put weight vests on guys. I'll have guys playing weight vests. Now, these are special weight vests that are only 10 pounds at most, but you take 10 pounds and go full speed with 10 pounds, that's a lot of force. It's a lot of load. So on cutting, on jumping, on stopping, on whatever it is, 10 pounds extra. So if Dru Holiday is 220 pounds, now he's having to slow down violently 230, that makes a big difference. So that's our weight room on the gym, or on the court rather. And then our weight room stuff is going to be more joint specific, isometric, overcoming isos, pushes, catches, things of that nature, so that, again, we can still get high neural demand, but we can save energy resource for what's important, and that's the court.
That's awesome. Now, last question, Mike, because you've been so generous with your time. What kind of advice can you give to new strength and conditioning coaches that are just starting out in the industry?
Man, it's funny because now I can honestly say I'm from the old school. Wow. I'm 38 in November. I feel 22. And I think a lot of that has to do with just my passion for every day to be great and to help people be great. But the reason why I open with that is because I see the transition, everything. And I think a lot of it has to do with social media and the ability to find information so fast. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad information out there, right? So it's so easy to get popping on social media without any formal education, training, and or skin in the game. Like, where is your time spent? You know what I mean? Who have you mentored under? Who have you studied? What books have you read? Give me something of substance. I understand you got hella followers and you got hella likes, but what do you stand on, right? And I'm not saying that everyone's like that, because everyone's not, but don't be so fast and quick to assume that being at the top of this game, which I feel like I'm not, but I train the top of the game. being at the top of performance training doesn't happen in 3 years. It happens in 10 years. It happens in 20 years. You have to put the time in. You have to study. You have to find a mentor. You have to sacrifice your time for free. And I feel like a lot of these new kids on the block aren't either A, don't know that they have to do that, or B, aren't willing to do that. And it's like, you're not going to get to this level thinking that it's going to happen in 2 to 3 years. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care who you think, how good you were as an athlete. It takes time and experience and consistently falling on your face and getting back up to be at the highest level, upper echelon of any field. So to feel like you're going to just skip steps is a mistake. Do the work, read daily, listen to podcasts, go to seminars, invest your time and money into your professional development, and find a mentor.
That's awesome. Where can people find out more about you, Mike?
Find me, check out our app page, www.gbghoops.com. We got all the information there where you can look at the app, look at the athletes that we work with. There's some educational content on there as well. Check me out on Instagram. My handle is at Mr Doin Moving, MrDoitMoving. And our business handle is gbg.hoops. Check us out.
Guys, he has some awesome stuff on social media. I want all my followers to go ahead and check him out. Really good stuff. Obviously, really good guy. He really brings the energy and he's given us so much knowledge. I'm really grateful for your time. I know how busy you are. Thank you for coming on to the podcast, Mike.
Look, man, let's just keep reaching back and pulling forward. Let's support each other. Let's make each other better. Let's push each other. Let's call each other out if need be. And let's not get offended if we do get called out.
Sure. Love it. Mike, just hold the line. Guys, talk to you guys next week.